Welcome to the Old Goalies podcast, brought to you by White Glove Goalkeeping. New music for the Old Goalies is provided by Stream Beats. Listen on Spotify. Old Goalies is not intended for goalkeepers under the age of 17. Thanks again for listening to the Old Goalies with your hosts, Greg Deutsch, Pat Johnston, and Eric Vaughter. On this episode, we welcome Tony Robinson from Galacticos Soccer Services.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're welcome into another episode of Old Goalies. We are thrilled tonight to have a special guest all the way from, as they say, across the pond. And his name is Robinson, and you may know him, and you may know more of his son who plays for the U.S. national team. However, I'm going to turn the introduction over to Pat Johnston because Pat and Tony were teammates at Duke University, actually my first year coaching at Duke University. And I always believe that teammates should give introductions to each other because there's just better banter when that happens. So, Pat, take it away.
Well, thank you, Evie. But before we get to Tony, Evie, are you sitting in an RV? Is Evie in an RV right now?
I am in the Winnebago. Don't go following up with that, Clark. It's an RV. And we are in Crested Butte, Colorado, visiting our oldest son, Zach.
Nice. So
yeah,
very nice.
So we're all over the globe tonight at Old Goalies.
We are. We've never been in England, EV.
That's true. We've never been in England. And
first, Ryan.
Yeah, and as far as I know, I mean, we got Pat in Florida, we got you and Ryan in Ohio. I'm in Colorado, and Tony's in England, so we're good to go.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Pat.
Stepping into the 21st century, we are. So, guys, it is certainly my pleasure to have Tony on the show. Tony and I go way back. We were roommates in Duke University back in the 80s, played with some great players at the time. Tony was one of the greatest enigmas of the entire bunch, if not the greatest. Tony will laugh and get mad at me at the same time when I say he was known as a professional player from the neck down, and nobody knew what was going on from the neck up with him. So that was probably what drew me to him to be one of my best buddies in life. And, to this day, we still talk a lot. Tony has basically carved a path for a lot of players coming out of England that play in the U.S. college system, that play in the professional leagues in England. And, of course, his closest tie would be Jedi, Anthony Robinson, his son. Tony, thank you for taking the time to be here tonight, man. Really glad to have you on with the boys.
It's an absolute pleasure. I just hope the show doesn't get banned when we're done.
So one thing, and actually I think we're going to be okay because there is a caveat there that we give out. We may slip sometimes and call Tony Marlin. So that is just...
That's the other guy.
Yeah. We got Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and we've got Tony Robinson and Marlon Robinson.
He's still at Duke, by the way, Marlon.
Well, before we get going, let me tell you my Tony Marlon Robinson story. So this is my first year coaching at Duke, and this is back. You guys will remember this, but maybe some of our listeners won't. Everybody had to do the Cooper for preseason, right? They had to do the Cooper, and that was just, none of us understood why you had to do it. You just had to do it. Well, we're out there, and somehow it got back to the coaches that Marlon hadn't done any training whatsoever all over the summer, right? But he guaranteed somebody that he was going to pass the Cooper. And sure enough, everybody else starts out, and they're going around the track there at Wallace Wade Stadium, and he's hanging in there, and and you can see kind of near the end he's starting to struggle a little bit, but he's on pace. At 11:59, because you had to do the Cooper in 12 minutes. At 11:59, Marlon finished line and passed out. Face on the track, and I can remember thinking, so this is what big time college soccer is all about. So, my Marlins. All right, sorry, I had to share that. Go ahead.
EV, I still have nightmares about that. Why did you bring that up?
Hey, didn't you spent the night in the hospital, right?
Yeah.
You had IVs and he was on the whole hooked up and everything.
Didn't make any difference. He got it done. He got it in true professional form. He got it done.
The actual reason it happened was because I drove all the way from New York to Durham non-stop with caffeine pills and had no sense to drink lots of water.
Right.
That's what caused it all.
So
I realized how popular I was, though, because of all the guys who visited me from the team who thought I was dying.
Yeah. So, I may find that picture in here to show my first experience. Maven, you'll love this. Okay. So my first game as a freshman, we're like a young, hungry team of American kids coming up. We're ranked like 11th in the country. And we play this, Rennie lines up this easy win for us in the first game against like a North Carolina Wesleyan or something. And no disrespect to Wesleyan. It's just, we were a fully funded program, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So we're up 5-6-0. And he finally puts Tony out on the pitch. And you guys, as we listen further into the show, we'll see that Rennie and Marlon didn't necessarily see things eye to eye quite often, to put it nicely. So Rennie puts Marlon out there, and he goes out and proceeds to just create an all-out melee fracas by finding some guy. And Marlon, what did he do? Did he something?
He fouled Mike Chapman. There's he studded him, dirty tackle, and that's why we benefit from VAR and things today, because the angle was wrong. So I'm looking at this thing thinking, that was my friend, and he's taken him out. The red mist came. And that was it.
And he lost his mind. He lost his mind. He nowadays he'd be in jail for assaulting the guy. He went at him full-fledged, and in the pictures in the newspaper. And Ryan, I think I'll be able to find these in the school newspaper. He's like got this overhand left coming right in the guy's jaw. And it shows the bench, and then there's this next picture with all the benches clearing and everybody like holding each other back or getting after it. And then there's a picture of me standing there in my penalty box with my arms crossed with this look on my face like, what the fuck is going on here? Right? We're winning 6-0. This guy goes out and loses his mind, and it's like this is some of the most ridiculous nonsense that me as an 18-year-old would ever witness. Okay, and I didn't know this guy at all at the time. I was in there 2 weeks as a freshman, and had been hanging out with this other guy named Jeff Romano, who was a deadhead, and so we were totally like. Romano and I were doing this thing, but Marlon was like the personality that when he came in the locker room, the seniors, dude, they loved you. Joey Ulrich, Herman Trophy winner, Graziano, starting left back, Louis Prieto. Those guys was like, Marlon, yeah, dude, boom, and stuff, because they knew you. And I was like, God, these like that was like. So, Evie, you knew that group of like Lola and Jenkins and McCoy, and they were a tight group. They were all in the same class, and Kane was part of that group. Okay. And then there was Romano, and I were kind of our own little, sideshow over here. But the true love and personality of that team was Marlon, Joe Ulrich, Grazi, Louis. laughing all the time, having a great old time, just lit the locker room up, right? And so Maven, this was the team that ended up going and playing that 8 overtime thriller against Indiana, where Yeagley won his first championship. So Marlon and I speculate on this, and for me, I have no reservations whatsoever, saying that if that moment of madness did not overcome him in that first game, we would have been national champions that year, because there is no way that if Marlon had been in that Indiana game and Rennie brought him in late, that he wouldn't have scored somewhere in those overtimes, because this guy as a player was fucking electric. I mean, it's not like he didn't have people wanting him. And Tony, I'll let you get into this from here, but like George Tarantini at NC State was like, you need to come here. And Marlon, you could tell your story about why you ended up at Duke. But even after that, the boys, Joey, Gratz, and Louie tried to get Marlon and Rennie back together and get simpatico to make up. And so, Tony, what did you in your wisdom do when that was brought before you?
Well, I think I was the original Mario Balotelli, many decades before his time. And I don't know if EV remembers this, but immediately after the game, the whole thing happened because Rennie and we never got on, and I was always this guy from England who I think I had a larger football historical knowledge than him, and I challenged authority, and when you look at it now, I was wrong. But back then, I grew up without a father, and I was a very, 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 very self-assured character. And so my freshman year, I played my whole freshman year, never trained. EV was right. I never trained. And in fact, Pat, you can remember all the times you used to lecture me when we were rooming together, and you used to like, why don't you just train? And I never did train, hated training. And but after the fight, I stormed off down to the locker rooms, and I just remember that Rennie basically said, somebody go and get him. And when I came into his office, all of the other coaches were standing there like bodyguards. And I just threw my kit bag at him, and I got back to the apartment, and Joey Ulrich, Graziano Giglio, and Louis Prieto, and Boris Ilicic at the time as well. And they all came to the apartment. They were like, come on, just calm down. We'll go and see him. Everything will be sorted. And I just looked at them and said, you guys. And I wouldn't bend at all. But I will say, guys, the most bittersweet moment of my entire time at Duke, a couple of days after the national championship defeat, I was in the pits with my court. I always had a court.
You did.
And I'm entertaining the court, and the team walks in, and I'll never forget to this day, Kenny Lola came and sat next to me, and he said, all the guys just want you to know, we think if you were in that game, we'd have won it. And I turned to Kenny and went, do you think that makes me feel fucking good? And I stormed off. So that was Marlon. That was the character of Marlon. Never knew what he was going to do.
So Marlon, Greg, I don't know if you've got like the timeline sorted on this for him.
I do. I'm ready to jump in.
All right, you fire away, and then
right.
I'll
yeah. What I was going to do, Pat, is, because you're obviously a large part of this, is to ask you some questions to get, Tony to talk as well as myself. So first, as you mentioned, he's from England. And I think people want to know the journey, how you got to White Plains, New York, and then down to Duke. And then we'll get back to, the services. We'll talk a little bit about Mansfield, things like that. So again, how did you end up in White Plains? And then what was your recruiting like at that point?
So I was born in Nottingham, England, which obviously is famous for Robin Hood and Nottingham Forest. And I was a very, very well-known player as a child. Everybody knew this player around the city, this young player. When I was very young, 9 years old, 10 years old. And but we lived in poverty. My father left when I was 2. My mum was struggling with me and my younger sister. She was a training to actually be a nurse, and we grew up in poverty. And her father lived in New Jersey, and he saw this advertisement that the US were recruiting heavily for medical staff from the UK. So she took this opportunity. She went first on her own, and I was staying with my aunt. And she then sent for my sister because she didn't settle, and I had to wait. And 1976, the bicentennial year, was when she got her green card, and I was able to go. I joined a very, very good high school program. White Plains had a lot of Latinos, Jamaicans. I was the only one from England, but it was a very Italians, Irish, very, very cultural team that we had. And how did I get recruited? It was basically when I was 14, I was playing in a game for Westchester County, and George Tarantini was there. And we were actually playing a team from England, a team from London, and this team was destroying us. It's like 10-0 at half time. And I come off at half time, and apparently the whole time Tarantini's watching me, not this team from England. And come off at half time, and I'm really angry. And I said to the lads, just give me the ball. So we have the kickoff. The ball comes to me. I take one touch. I'm probably one step inside our half. And the ball comes to me. I take one touch, and I hit this shot straight into the top corner of the goal. And then we end up losing like 21-1, something like that. And after the game, I'm ready to kill someone. I'm like an insane person. And Tarantini comes over laughing his head off, just laughing. And he says, I want you to come and train with me next week. And I said, where's that? He said, in Long Island. And I said, how the bloody hell am I supposed to get there? And he said, I'll come and get you. So Tarantini came all the way down from Arlington, upstate New York, picked me up, took me to Long Island. I'm training with, at the time was an under-18, New York State under-18 team. And that was my sort of first encounter of Tarantini, who I loved like a father. And I can't, that's another podcast, my feelings for Tarantini. But I had a very, 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 very good high school career. And basically, Tarantini was desperate to take me to NC State. But I also had Joe Maroney at UConn, who had come to watch me in a game. And this is crazy, Greg, but I actually repeated defeat. So in that game, I scored a goal from just inside our half in the top right-hand corner. And Joe Maroney had brought with him the letter of intent and the number 8 shirt. And said, I'm not leaving, where's your parents? I need to see. They'd won the national championship, I think the year before or the previous year. They were the number 1 powerhouse. And this is something that's hilarious, guys. His son wore the number 8 shirt, and he was a Herman Trophy winner.
Yeah.
So he comes with this number 8 shirt, and I'm like, wow, he's giving me his son's shirt. So, right, that's where I'm going. And as fate would have it, Graziano and Louis were at Duke. And their coach, Emilio, I played for on Sundays. And they're telling Coach Emilio, you got to get this guy to come to Duke. And probably the only good thing I ever did in my life was I was a good student. So I had the grades. And
let me interrupt here. Were you a good student or were you just fucking brilliant?
Well, I didn't study. I didn't study
That's my
same as
point.
training. Yeah. I seem to just learn it in the classroom, guys.
That's it. Yeah.
So Pat's right about that, but it really came from. Now you have to remember, guys. I don't know if America's still the same. I don't know, but Evie, you'll remember this. In those days, if you were a black athlete with a good GPA, everybody was after you.
Mm-hmm.
So I had Princeton, West Point, Hofstra, Hartwick. Remember, Pat? Hartwick were big at that time.
Yeah.
And I pretty much had every top college after me. And it was going to be UConn. UConn was, that's the one I wanted. And he said, you're going to wear the number 8, 4 years. You're going to be All-American. You're going to go pro. You're going to be a Hall of Fame here. Da, da, da. I said, oh, fantastic. And then my mum comes home from work one day. Coach Emilio's told me about Duke. That's where you're going. And if any of you know Jamaican women, that was the end of that argument.
So he ended up there. It's funny when you say you were a good student because you weren't a good student. You were just a smart motherfucker is what you were.
Yeah, that's true. I was not a good student.
Yeah, because I lived with you for a while, and
you never saw me study.
I was in the library more than you were. And
correct.
And I know I'm not a good student. So anyway,
that's all true.
The other part about this is, again, we're all of kind of the same era, but to have a player of Tony's stature, it was very rare to have a big, strong, unless you were Clemson or Howard at that time. To be honest with you, those were the two schools that had predominantly black studs.
Alabama A&M was the other.
Absolutely.
A&M.
So here's a guy that's obviously intelligent. He's a stud, and he can score goals from the foot over halfway line. Of course everybody wants him. I mean, that's a no-brainer. So because back then, Kenny Lola was kind of a normal-sized guy in soccer. Now obviously it's totally different. But Marlon was far ahead of his time physically, particularly for the college game in the U.S.
To put it in perspective, actually, a couple things here. You were Mario Balotelli before Mario Balotelli, definitely. That is so fitting. But to me, the player that I see nowadays that I watch and I say, that's Marlon. If Marlon really put his mind to it, you remind me, or he reminds me a lot of you, I should say, is when I watch Danny Welbeck play. And I go, that's what Marlon would have been like, in the top flight. He would have been a Danny Welbeck kind of player. EV, you were around for this game. I know you were when we played at Campbell.
Yeah.
And Rennie put him in overtime. And he hit one of those shots from like 35 and he hit the crossbar I'm not making this up. The goal shook.
Yeah.
Okay. It was the goal. The posts were embedded in the ground. It was one of those where the poles were anchored. They weren't like one of those movable goals. And the post shook, right? And it's OT. And then in those days, OT was sudden death. And we're like, oh man. And then sure as shit, like 5 minutes later, he hits the same exact fucking shot and he scores. And it's just like, oh my God, where does this guy come from to do this kind of stuff? And Marlon, do you remember what you did celebrating after that goal?
Greg, I turned and ran all the way across the pitch like this to Rennie shouting, "Fuck you." Fuck you.
Pat, let me ask this.
Yeah.
When he was in training, what was he like in shooting drills against you?
He was all over the place.
Yep.
Really. Yep. I don't remember him. And that was why I was like, why don't you train, dude? Just go out and get a consistent stroke and hit it, But yeah, it was like you didn't know what was coming off his foot. And frankly, that was the way he was as a person. You just didn't know what was going to come out of his mouth next either. It was just like an adventure, And that's why I was just drawn to him. Like, this guy is like a walking show of just, you're going to be entertained no matter what, And I just was like, he'd hit something where it'd be like, I couldn't touch it. It was like, but then the next three were like, he was hitting the scoreboard when he, on the other side of the field, when he was shooting at this goal kind of thing.
I'll tell you guys, this, what I'm about to tell you is a true story. And my brother Pat might not even remember this. He might not remember this. Okay. So this was at a time when I was at my lowest. I was, Rennie, Tommy Kane had come in. I was surplus to requirements. And it was just eating away at me and eating away at me and eating away. And of course, I learned from all of that in bringing Jedi up. I learned from all of it. But I didn't have the father. I didn't have the guy to say, stop messing around. Focus on, you're there to get your degree and prove Rennie wrong. I didn't have that, right? So even the senior players that were trying to look after me, my ego was bigger than them. It really was. So I was like, what do you guys know? So we're in practice one day and I'm really down, really, really down. And I'm not even wanting to be, I'm like, wait till this is over and I can go and have some fun. And we're doing a shooting drill. And the drill is, we're maybe about 10 yards inside the opposite half. So Pat's in the goal quite far away. And we're like 10 yards in and you have to, the ball comes to you and you have to dribble across the halfway line to maybe about the arc and then shoot. And I've shot like 3 of these, as Pat said, all over the place. And out of the corner of my eye, I see Pat laughing. Right? So the next ball that I get, off this corner of the eye, I see that he's standing on the 18-yard line. So I get the ball, take one touch, launch it. It goes over his head into the thing. He just shakes his head like this. And after training, he goes, "What the hell? How did you do that?" And I went, "Don't laugh at me."
Well, you are right. I don't remember.
You don't remember, but I promise you that happened. I promise you.
I wouldn't doubt it.
Yeah, Tony, talk a little bit about your hero, Johan Cruyff.
Yeah.
What made you drift toward him? And at what age? And obviously, he was a fantastic player that everyone on this panel knows. But what made you? I mean, because there were a lot of good players in his era growing up, and he's a little controversial at times. But share with us again. What made him your hero?
There were two things really, and Evie and Pat can testify to this. I never followed anybody else. Like I was always a guy who was I wasn't conventional. And when I was a kid growing up, every black player in Nottingham, it was the Brazilians. Okay, so it's the Brazilians. It's Pele, it's Jairzinho, and that's who they could relate to. But I was a student of the game from 1970. So I was 7 years old. I watched Chelsea and Leeds in the FA Cup final, which is probably the most famous FA Cup final replay. And I watched these two teams, and something happened, and I wasn't just playing football anymore. I was paying attention to all the players, the formations, the managers, the stadiums. I was really paying attention to it all. And in my head, this was football. Football's played like this. And then the 1974 World Cup came, and the first game I saw of that incredible Holland team, and I saw Cruyff, and I was 11 years old. It literally, I had an experience. So something happened, and I was just like, "Oh my God, that's football," And I still remember the next day going into school, saying to all the guys, "Did you see that? Did you see that game? Did you see that?" And they're all like, "Yeah, Holland were good." And I was like, "No, did you see how they were playing? Did you see that Cruyff guy?" And I just thought he was an alien. I thought like I was too young to have seen Pele. And also I missed George Best. When I saw George Best, he was in decline and coming to the end of his career. And like you said, there were a lot of really good players around that time. But Cruyff, I was studying the game, and this guy came, and to me, he was an alien. I was like, "What is this? There's nothing like this." And I became obsessed. I was like, I've got to be this guy. And so, one thing Evie and Pat can remember, I could dribble. I was 6'3", but I could dribble with a football. And a lot of the time I was driving everyone crazy because I was over dribbling. But I had really, really good ball control for dribbling, and that was from just studying Cruyff and being in awe of him, because I'd never seen anything like it. And of all the great players that have come after, even, you know, I think maybe the closest to me thinking football isn't the way I think it is was Maradona, but it never had that thing, you know, probably because you're a kid, you know, you're a kid and you see something, it stays with you forever.
You know, there were, like, when we were roommates, there were many nights where we would sit there and just talk about the football that was played, you know, in the 70s. And like Evie, I know Evie remembers this, when one time we were going to be Italy. We were going to be Brazil and Italy combined when we came out. You remember that, Evie?
Yeah. Oh,
That was
the thing was that we're standing there listening to you guys, and we're thinking, what in the fuck are they talking about? And Coach Rennie would turn to me and say, "What are they talking about?" And charge. So,
yeah, it was. And so Maven, think about this. You're on the team, okay? And you've got these two huge personalities on the team that are just telling everybody, this is the way we're going to fucking play, man. This is these guys here, and you know this and that. And we got all these straight New Jersey boys and we're winning and all of that. And they're looking at us like we're from outer space. But yet we would go back into our room, our cave at night, and we would sit there and conspire about this. Man, we're gonna change the game in college. We're gonna become a team for the ages. And so, you know, we were just two young, stupid kids that had these massive dreams of just being these revolutionaries, and we weren't afraid to go out and speak our minds. That's for sure. EV can attest to that. But, you know, at the end of the day, we had all kinds of great conversations. And I think from that, you know, you talk about being the precursor to Mario Balotelli, but you and I, in terms of, we also coached together the same group of kids in college. We coached kids as college players. We went out in a local community and coached a Durham Chapel Hill select team. And dude, we were playing tiki-taka 30 years before there was tiki-taka. We were all about the Clockwork Orange and, you know, move and swirl and fucking nice little passes and and you know, so
and Pat, do you remember when the kids asked us why they said, why are we playing like this? And I remember Pat going, you guys you don't get it.
So Pat and Tony, let me ask this. Your senior years, right? It's over. The landscape in the U.S. at that time was challenging to play. Pat, you went overseas. Tony, what was your mindset at that point? I'm sure, obviously, you and Pat had talked, hey, I'm going to go here. I'm going to try this. We know where Pat went. Share with us what that spring was like, and then, you know, the journey on to playing in the pros.
The spring was, Pat calls it my Eddie Murphy period. So I basically had my court all over campus, and didn't really take anything serious, and it just went in a flash, really. And I was lucky because my best friend in high school was Greek, and he said, I'll take you to Greece, and we'll get you to play over there. But that was back in the days when, you're only allowed one foreign player in Europe, and so we went around the top division in Greece at the time. There was none of this concept of Premier Leagues and Super Leagues, and it was just Division 1, Division 2. We went to Division 1 clubs, and I'll be honest with you guys, the spring had worked against me, so I wasn't fit. I wasn't in any kind of condition. I should never have gone, to be honest. But he got a bit fed up of this. He like Pat. He was like, "Why don't you just get super fit and we can make loads of money?" But yeah, I found I was the only black man in Greece, I think, at the time, and I still found girls. So that all worked against me. He then left. He was fed up of it. He couldn't get through to me. He was getting married. His fiance wanted him back in White Plains. And I stuck around for a bit, and I ended up on a second division team. And I couldn't play because they already had a foreigner. So they said, "No, you train. We don't want anyone else to have you. So just be patient. Stay with us." But I wasn't patient. Pat can tell you that. EV can tell you that. That wasn't my virtue. And I just said, "I'm out of here, guys." And and they're like, "We got a contract." I said, "Sue me." And I got on the plane back to Nottingham, and I'll tell you guys, if you want to know something, I came straight back to Nottingham to my aunt where I'd lived before. And I said, "I'm going down to the City ground. I'm going to ask Brian Clough for a trial." And my aunt's like, "Are you crazy? That guy slaps people." So I go down to the City ground, and I'm waiting patiently, and they all come in, and I said, "Mr. Clough, I went to Duke. I'm a really good player, and I want a trial."
I went to Duke.
And he thought I was American, right? So he says, "Americans can't play football, son."
I've heard that before.
Right, and just walked away, and I'm standing there like, "Oh wow!" So I went and played non-league, and I was on a very, very low-level non-league team with a guy that I went to school with. Funnily enough, he was now the coach of this team, and I got on this team with him, and I'm scoring goals like crazy. And you have the FA Cup, the FA Vase, and the FA Cup, the FA Trophy, and the FA Vase. So the FA Vase is the smaller, for the smallest non-league teams. We're in that competition, and I'm scoring goals like crazy. And we get to the quarterfinal of the Vase, and huge attention around us because we're this unknown, rinky-dink little Nottingham team getting to the quarterfinal of the Vase, and he got this striker who's scoring these goals and everything. And the next thing I know, a guy named Ivan Hollett, who was a scout, waited for me after the game and said, "I want to take you to Mansfield." And that was it. I went up to Mansfield, and I'll never forget sitting outside the manager's office while they were all inside. You think about this today, guys, with agents and all this. There were no agents in those days. And my coach and Ivan Hollett are in there doing a deal that gets them money, not me. So, I get signed. I'm put in the reserves. I actually was in a team. EV and Pat will remember this guy. the team I was in was with Kevin Hitchcock, the Chelsea goalkeeper, and Russell Slade. Russell Slade went on to be a manager. His last stint was at Grimsby. So that was the reserve team. I'm banging in goals again like crazy. I think I got up to 11 goals in 9 games, something like that. And Leicester City are watching me. And I've not broken into Mansfield's first team yet, but I've been called by Leicester's chief scout saying, we're gonna put a bid in for you. And then, as life does, destiny takes over. Next game was at Notts County's ground. Very, very, very heavy, muddy pitch. No grass on the pitch whatsoever in those days. And 1 tackle, and that was it. End of football.
So from there, did you have any aspirations of getting into coaching? Obviously,
No.
You got on the real world.
No.
None. Wow. So what
None.
made you want to get into coaching?
When Anthony came along. When Anthony
okay.
came along. So to put it into perspective, Anthony's older brother, Sean, I didn't want to coach Sean. Right? I knew. I mean, as crazy as I was, and I was crazy, but I did have a logical side to me, and a very compassionate side. And I said, if I coach this kid, I'm going to be too overbearing. I'm going to want him to have everything I didn't have. And I know what I'm like, and I'm going to be so passionate, So Sean started to play, and I was actually coaching another team while Sean was playing. In Milton Keynes, where we lived. And that was simply because of the club that Sean was playing in at the time. I just wanted to help out. So I'm simply just helping out. And then I find this housing estate in Milton Keynes with all these kids, underprivileged kids. And I'm like, wow. So I form a little team with these guys, and they were very successful. But I wasn't taking it serious at all. It was more, just to be around Sean, my oldest son. And then Anthony came along and was doing very strange things from a very, very young age. So Anthony was basically walking at 9 months, and I was like, that's strange.
Yeah, that is. Before we go down all that, and there is a lot. At what point do you decide I'm going to start my soccer services? I'm going to please ask how you come up with that name. So take it away from here. Obviously, you're laughing, so you know exactly what I'm sharing with everybody. So,
well, we can jump forward in time. So you can imagine that very, very quickly, I went through some phase of coaching different levels and teams and stuff, and doing badges and everything. And then all of a sudden, the realization came that Anthony had something, really did have something. And I have a terrible memory, Greg, for names. If your name wasn't in that box,
we do know that. And I'm going to hijack it, as Pat says.
Yeah.
I do know that. You can get into why all the nicknames, which is a great segue.
Terrible name. Terrible with names. I forget as soon as the person tells me the name, I forget the name. So Real Madrid at the time came up with the Galacticos concept. The president of Real Madrid, I'm going to sign a star player every year. And they came in with that term Galacticos. So what happened is, when I was coaching the kids to remember their names, I would give them a name of a famous player they reminded me of. Okay. And that's where all the nicknames came from. And I could remember that every player, 1,000 players, I could remember them. But if his name was Pat Johnston, I'd forget him in a second. Right? So what happened is, when Jedi signed for Everton, I said, I don't want to carry on with this grassroots football, these crazy leagues, parents storming on the pitch and punching referees and all that. I've had enough of it all. So at that point, I decided I want to do something. Like I really wanted to do something to make up for all of the pain I caused. And I sat there and I thought, nicknames, star players. I'm going to form my band of Galacticos. And at that point, I wasn't a company then. I had a day job in IT, but that was my little thing, the Galacticos. And I had a friend who is also a friend of Pat's, named Jimmy Hayes. And Jimmy's like the greatest scout I've ever seen in my life. And Jimmy would go around Liverpool and he'd bring these kids. So the thing, Greg, was training, right? We weren't interested in being in leagues and cups. We were just going to train like gladiators. And Jimmy would go and find these players, and they were all shapes and sizes. And, you know, he'd bring a little chubby kid, and I'd say, Jimmy, he can't do my warm-up. What are you doing? And he'd say, just speak to me after training. And this kid would be like Gaza, you know? So we built it up, we built it up. And then we decided, well, let's ring some academies and take the kids in and play some friendlies. And we developed this reputation of playing the game the right way, conducting ourselves the right way, and having lots of talent. And we'd go around all the academies and they'd say, those two boys. Every game we played, they'd take some boys, and then we'd replenish. Jimmy would go and find the replacements. And so that went on for a while. And really, that's where the name Galacticos came from. And then I was working in IT, which is an insane world, a very insane world. Yeah. And I was a workaholic in an insane world. And I got to a point where I just had enough. And I said, you know, if I'm going to leave this life, I want to be helping kids for the rest of it. So I made a decision one day. That's it. I'm not going back in. And I sat there and thought of, okay, Galacticos Soccer Services. I'll do a bit of this, a bit of that, a bit of this, a bit of that. And that's how it was all born.
I was going to, share with us, you said you woke up one day and said, no more IT, I'm going to go do this. Were you, obviously you were very confident, but what was going through your head like, oh my God, all these challenges that I don't know where it's going to end, but I'll just stay in my lane and just work my ass off?
Yeah. The one thing that changed, I guess, me as a person was when Sean was born. I changed completely. I guess you can really say that's when Marlon died.
That's when Marlon died and Tony was born.
Tony was born, and I became this very, very serious workaholic guy, working every hour God sent. And I put everything into it. And as Pat said, you know, I was never an academic person, but I was smart. I was smart. And in project management, a lot of it is about common sense, right? And being able to communicate simply, because in IT everybody's complicated. So I had that ability, but it's a world of crazy decisions, and you know, what's the word? Spinning the real reality of what's really, and that's not me at all. It's not me. I am sorry. This is the truth. This is what's going on. And I just got to a point, Greg, where I was just tired of battling people who didn't want to tell the truth and tell this is what's really going on. So I just was really, really, really stressed out, physically burnt out, mentally burnt out. And I just woke up one morning, sat on the bed, and I couldn't put my suit on and go to work. So I just said, you know what? My wife, Kelly, who's you know, the greatest thing ever happened to me. She said, "What are you doing sat on the bed?" And I said, "I can't go in." And she said, "So what are you going to do?" I said, I can't do it. I'm just not going in." And she said, "Well, whatever happens, we'll be all right." And when she said that, that was it. That, you know, I'll be honest with you, Greg, I wasn't afraid of anything.
Excellent. Yeah. I was going to ask, share with us what the landscape was in that world as far as scouting. You know, you mentioned you had gotten in with the academies. Was there a lot of people getting in with the academies as well? And was it a free-for-all, chaotic? You know, describe what that situation was at that point.
Yeah, the world had changed. So, you know, there was a period when I was about 4-year period when I was more focused on work than Galacticos. I'd almost stopped doing Galacticos for a while. Excuse me. And in that time, the world just completely changed. So the PFA, the Professional Footballers Association, the academies, the Premier League, all of these entities and the Football Association, they all got together and realized, you know, we need to educate these young footballers. And so all of these, from the Premier League all the way down to like the ninth tier, you know, 10th tier of English football, because we have a very, very deep elite football structure in England. There's no other country like it in terms of, you know, the levels. Our 8th tier in England is many other countries' 4th tier in terms of quality. But they all started to implement these education programs, football and education. And of course, that just sort of moved into this space that Galacticos were in, which was, you know, I'm going to give you training every day, you know, really, really Spartan training, a lot more than you get by joining a grassroots club. And then these programs came, and they're now trying to operate like professional academies. And so the kids are getting that volume of training and games. And so, you know, I found at that point that, you know, you either go that way, or you think of something else to do. And it wasn't until COVID came along when we had that period to just think and say, well, what can I do that might be different.
So here's something that, I mean, Tony and I are very much involved in this, and Greg, if I'm jumping ahead of you, forgive me. But so what Tony just described was this paradigm shift in the youth system in England. And Tony, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're talking about maybe 10, 15 years ago? Is that about right? Okay. So now you look at, this is something we talked about in our Foursquare, was the American culture. Greg, you're coaching at Cub, right? And your top teams, those kids are coming out maybe 4 nights a week, and that's heavy duty training and stuff. Tony's talking about is all these English kids in these 10 tiers and these academies, they're being trained like pros from 12, 13, 14, even younger perhaps.
Yeah, from 8 years old. 8 years old.
So why are the colleges taking all these English kids? There you have it right there. It's I mean it's just a different culture and where these kids are coming from. And so maybe we get there in it, but Tony and I are like trying to plug this gap or give an alternative to the American kids, that there are places to play, just because the English and the Norwegians and the Germans are coming over and taking the college spots. Please don't think that it's over for you guys. We're trying to ingrain them in these very systems that have produced these players that have supplanted them in the college system. It's like, hey, you can do this too, and if you really want it, now you can go challenge them.
Yeah.
So,
great. Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, thank you for interjecting that. I think this is a good segue as we approach an hour here. This is going to sound, I'm not sure how it's going to sound, but it's sort of like a plug for what you're doing. Go into, the elite development, mentoring, the aftercare, the program with Bermuda, your partnerships, and then, we'll talk about, some of the success with the pros and the U.S. scholarships. And then we'll end, with family and talk about, of course, everyone wants to hear some stories about, Jedi. And I've got some things I want to bring up as well. So again, let's go back to you on some of the programs I just mentioned and go into that as, we try to come to some conclusions here on why someone listening should send their child over to you.
It's funny. Let me take that first real quick. Is EV, you were very instrumental in like us actually activating this thing that Tony and I have been talking about for a while. And that was Gino Valente. Mm-hmm. And, introducing Joey, and I talked to Gino kind of, did the due diligence on him. And so Gino went over and Tony mentored him. And so he was the prototype in a sense. And it was like, if anything, the atmosphere here, the culture here with the colleges just started to accelerate the very thing that we were working on. It's like pushing the American kids out, no true freshmen. And it's just really getting more and more prevalent now, especially with the roster changes that the NCAA has coming down. Some real scary stuff if you're a high school senior and you're an American kid, where it's like, your chances are slim and none, and Slim is walking out the door right now. So anyway, so Tony, sorry, I'm stealing it from you.
No, carry on.
I'll get back to you definitely. We started, so Tony, because of the Galacticos and the relationships he built going through those early years before the adoption of what was it, Howard Wilkinson's Charter of Excellence and all of that. It's so Tony's now, the clubs respect his integrity and player development, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we're seeing on that end over there, these clubs now, or many of these entities that are enticing the American kids to come over, and they're charlatans. It's like, oh yeah, you're going to come to England and you're going to get this experience and blah, blah, blah. And actually Tony got broken in with Spain and a Spanish group who was basically, false advertisement, selling the bullshit of a trial, professional trial, and all of this. So basically I became the one on this end that's like, but brother, I think I could provide you a pipeline of kids, but the last thing I want to do, and I know Tony's a bird of a feather because we basically grew up together.
Yeah.
As I said, conspiring in our room as college kids, it was all about the integrity of what we do. And so Tony on his end started finding legitimate places for these kids to go. And so we've partnered up in that where it's like, hey, this is one of the particular schools that is going to do what they say they're going to do. And they're not going to, steer you wrong kind of thing. And frankly, if you're the average American parent here with a kid coming out of high school that wants to play, how the hell are you going to know what's right and what's wrong and who's good and who's bad? And so that's the niche that we see. Like, it's like, hey, here's where we can legitimately be of service to these people that want to continue to play. So, I mean, that would be what I'm saying with it. Tony, please add what you need to add on that, because I mean, in a nutshell, that's one of the things we're operating with to this day, where we're now, we probably have 10, 12 kids over there right now. And it's just going to, that funnel's just going to get wider.
Yeah. And it kind of started, Greg, with Pat and I just repeating our college days. We were always keeping in touch with each other down the years, but we then sort of got to where we were repeating those times in our room where we were talking about, we're going to change the world, we want to do this and that. And really, Pat was the enabler, because he was like, look, I need to educate you about what's going on in America, and college, it's just nothing like when we played. And here's all the reasons, here's all the forces that have collided. The transfer portal, the MLS can now draft out of high school, the Title IX shutting down men's soccer programs, so many forces. And there's been one today. I've literally just found one today. They're getting rid of the letter of intent, and basically making it so, okay, really your scholarship's for a semester, and then if I'm not happy with you, I can get rid of you. Few weeks ago, it was the 28-man roster cap thing. So it just seems like something out there is deciding to make college soccer as professional as it can get. And Pat really realized, in all the years that Tony's been doing Galacticos, he knows a hell of a lot of people. He at every level of football. And so he had this brainchild, if you want to call it, of a pipe plugging into this network that I had, but we didn't want to be involved with everyone I knew. So it was like, can we just find a few unique entities? No one size fits all. That they all need to be different. And Pat had this idea of, you go into the restaurant, you get given the menu, and you're like, oh, I just don't know what to pick. This all looks good. And then the waiter says, well, may I recommend this? And from there, we go into, okay, well, there's a hell of a lot of people out there that just recruit recruit a student athlete or an athlete, and they land in their destination and that person disappears. But what if we actually support these guys? Now, I'd been mentoring players locally for many years. I wasn't just coaching. I wasn't just funneling kids to academies. I was always in their life, and even the lads that I'd sent to America, I stuck around. For me, it wasn't about, oh, I've sent you there. It was about, I want to help you to be successful in life. And again, Pat was like, yeah, but this is really valuable, what you've been doing. So, I guess it was just, two songwriters get together, and they're able to write an album, and the album's very different. And we make a pun on that all the time. But really, that's what it was, Greg. It was just this concept of, find them another option, but look after them. Don't just be what's the word, a trafficker.
Right. So right. So what are you saying? I mean, if we were going to commoditize this or whatever, one of the things is we don't, it's like with Gino, we found Gino a place. Tony stays and talks to him regularly. It's like, he's Uncle Tony, frankly, now. But it's like for us, the important thing is like, yeah, we get you over to this institution over there. But you know what? We want to make sure that when you come back, now we're going to use the connections we have in the United States to find a place for you back here to play, right? So as Tony said, it becomes an enduring relationship that really sees them through the entire pathway, and in that you form these relationships, and some kids are hardship cases, some kids aren't. But at the end of the day, it's like, we just keep the love alive for these kids. And it's just, for me, I enjoy it. It's just, I know this sounds hokey pokey bullshit, but it's really a way of giving back, because sometimes we aren't rewarded for this or whatever, but it's like somewhere down the line, if that kid's going to do the same thing, for somebody, boom, it's like passing it on, and it's a wonderful thing, But the most important thing about what we represent, and we really, do we have a name for it? Will we call it the Odyssey? Because it is a path to travel, right? But we make sure that we take those spots of ignorance for them, and we fill those in with our knowledge, so that they get a complete understanding of the entire pathway. It becomes no unknowns. And it's like, you don't know that, but we do. Please trust us. This will be the best path or destination for you at this point in time. And we're not going to just leave you there. We're here with you till the end. And that's really what we do.
Okay. You've had 7 pros, over 20 kids get into college. Where do you see the future of this now that, you've heard Pat allude to all these NCAA Division I changes and people hitting pause? Do you feel, quote unquote, your business is going to get better because of this unknown? And Pat, definitely shared something that I think everyone feels is, where is that American kid going to go play? And I think it's, you talk to these college coaches who are recruiting internationals, and you ask them, if you did that, imagine, you were a former player and I played, we would have never had a chance to play if you were doing that, right? Mm-hmm. Of course. And so then it comes down to really, I think, very simple feelings on what they say. For instance, we love it in this city. My family loves it. I'm paid to win. The AD doesn't care, right, where the kids are coming from, as long as I'm winning. I'm getting paid a lot of money. My assistants are getting paid a lot of money. They're devoting a lot of resources in upgrading facilities. There is a lot of expectations, and that comes with winning. And if I'm not winning, I'm out the door. So I get it. I don't like it like everybody else. I don't see it really changing that much because of that. But what I find interesting is when you talk to an AD and you bring up, yeah, I get the winning, but let's talk about the alumni. 4 or 5 years ago, you had all these internationals. Where are they now? They don't come back. They don't donate. The AD doesn't really have anything to say about that.
That's true.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if they care. That's a whole nother segment. But I think it's just reality of where it is.
Greg, I have an even sort of more ethical view of this, and you can call me old-fashioned. I am. So, again, Tony came along and grew up and saw the world a lot different. And I am old-fashioned. And in England, we call it old school. And I am old school. I'm not woke. I say it like it is. And if you don't like what I say, shoot me or move on. But the ethical part of me in this whole thing was I thought collegiate athletics was put there for the American kid to have a career through sport. The American kid. And I know soccer is the world's biggest sport, but you got to look after your own first. And I think that soccer in America, as college soccer, has gone crazy. It's almost like the leagues, the big leagues in football. France, Germany, Spain, and you look at the top tiers in these leagues, and it's all foreign players, but nowhere more than England is it that bad that we have such a heavy percentage of foreign managers and players. And I compare that to collegiate soccer and say, oh my God, you've gone that way. You've gone. There are some rosters that there's no American kid there, and so ethically, I'm like, well, what are you people doing? The whole point was for your country's kids to get an education through sport and go on and contribute to society. And as you said, Greg, they're not coming back as your alums and things like that, So that saddens me. It makes me sad. Really makes me sad. I think back to my days. I'm a freshman at Duke, and every single player in that team came out of high school. Every single player. And I'm looking and going, what the hell's going on? What are these people doing? And I do believe between the four of us, the moment you open that Pandora's box of money, that's your countdown to disaster, right? And time will tell, but that's been my experience in football. I was an agent once, and I had many people crap all over me. As an agent. So for me, right, Pat and I, we thought initially, why don't we just set up our own academy, and they'll come to Florida, they'll get the best of everything and our care and everything, and we'll put them onto a path and we'll look after them. But the market is moving so fast because of all these forces that are blocking the high school kids that Pat realized by the time we build all that and we're happy with all of that, everyone's going over there. And these things are happening now in Spain. They're happening in Portugal in very, very high numbers. And they're growing in England exponentially. And I believe in the next 10 years, just like remember me telling you, Greg, about the football and education programs in all the tiers. I believe that's coming with the international academies. So in 10 years' time, they'll be everywhere.
Yeah, our producer Ryan's got an interesting question, and I like everyone's take on it. And it sort of, follows the MLS with the foreigners, right? Do you think the NCAA would cap any of these rosters as far as you can only have so many foreigners? I'm just curious. EV, you may want to start, but go Pat, and then Tony, you can have the last word, and then we'll talk about Jedi.
I think the NCAA right now is a toothless organization, and I think the NCAA cares about survival of the Power Five conferences. Soccer's an Olympic sport, and it's kind of along for the ride. So no, I don't think there will be any sort of cap on it. I think that soccer coaches could get together and try to create the college coaches could get together and try to create some sort of a standard. But to be honest with you, Greg, you mentioned it yourself, the ADs don't really.
Yeah.
The Olympic sports are a cost of doing big business for the Power Five conferences in football and basketball.
Yeah, no doubt.
Look at it, and it's as long as are relatively happy and nobody's in jail, portals active. That's all the ADs really care about.
Yep. Okay. Fair enough.
That's what I think. Go ahead.
Yeah. All right, Pat.
I think it's very possible. I'm not trying to duck and dodge this question at all. I don't know what they're going to do next, because what's going on right now is like a freaking bomb from outer space. What they're doing right now, it's just like, what is happening? And it's just happening so fast. And if anything, they're just making everything looser and freer. So on the one hand, you say they're never going to implement any more rules, because they're just wiping out all the rules now that we've lived an entire lifetime, respecting. While at the same time, you would think common sense would say, yes, they would, because it's one of those things. It's like a balancing act on a seesaw. And right now it's just gone way too far one way. So they may see the problem and say, yes, we need to bring the Americans back into this game just a bit to level this thing out. But Greg, I'm with EV. Ultimately, if I was a betting man, I wouldn't bet a lot, but I'd say EV's probably what he said is where I would lay my money down.
Yeah, I think it is either, just so everyone knows. I don't think it will, because I just think, if you think about it, the better players, right, either they're going to go to a top NCAA program or they're going pro. Yeah. So then what players are left? Okay. Well, and then the levels down and so on and so forth. So back to you, Tony.
Wasn't it Bruce Arena? I think you said this actually, that Bruce Arena said, what's the difference between the college game now and back when he was at Virginia? And he said, well, the first thing you would say is Tony Meola, Tab Ramos, and John Harkes would never go to college and play. That would be the biggest difference.
That's right.
So
well, I'm very sentimental for a team that sadly I didn't play on, but I think the 1982 Duke team is one of the all-time college soccer great teams. I really think that. I mean, 4 Herman Trophy winners, right? So all of those players, all of them, could have easily been drafted out of high school if that was at that time.
Right.
Easily.
Right.
That was a hell of a team, really was.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about your son, Jedi. So, we need to start, of course, everyone wants to know, how did he get that nickname? And so let's go back a little bit. When you were talking about nicknames, he chose no soccer players, for whatever reason, and you're going to go into that. And how did he pick, where he is right now?
So it's funny because I used to give the nicknames to the kids, but not initially. Like it would be like, I need some time to figure out who you remind me of. Sometimes I'd know instantly. And then other times I was like, you're a kid with a bit of an attitude, so I'm going to make you wait. So the nicknames didn't all come at a point in time. And it just so happened that I was very, very hard on Jedi. When I look back, I was brutal, to be honest. The thing I feared with Sean actually happened. So he was always going to be the last one to get the nickname. And it just so coincided at the time of when the Star Wars trilogies were released. And Jedi, as a young kid, was really into Star Wars. And he had a lightsaber and the outfit, and he was really. And so when it was his time, and I said, right, it's time for your nickname. He was a winger in those days, Greg. He was a left winger, and I said, you're going to be Henri, because he had his hair. His hair was in England we call it a crew cut, where you have no hair, like the army. And Thierry Henry was like that. Left wing, Thierry Henry was playing on the left coming in, and Jedi's was a Arsenal fan, still is, and loved Henry. I said, you're going to be Henry. He said, no. I want to be a Jedi. And I said, but that's not a famous player. And he said, but that's I don't want to be a famous player. And it's so weird, Greg, because I was so hard on the kid, and I just said, okay. He just got me on a good day. He just got me on a good day.
Yeah, so it's interesting if you guys paid attention. Tony said, he was a very good player at a young age. Obviously, so was his son. He started at age 11, and we all know, he was with Everton, but you were also being pursued by the Blackburn Rovers in Liverpool. What was that like as a parent trying to figure this whole thing out?
Well, Greg, let me. This is very important because you want to know the proper historical path. Jedi actually was playing football at 2. At 2 years old, I used to bring him to I was coaching his older brother at that time. A team of his older brother was playing on. I used to bring him with my daughter, his older sister. She was sort of like, you keep an eye on him because, he'll just disappear. But his instructions were, my training sessions always, there's like 50 balls, right? I like balls to be everywhere. And if you're playing a game, the game doesn't stop. Just get the nearest ball, get it back in, play. And Jedi's job at 2 years old was go and get the balls, but you can't pick them up. So at 2 years old, he's running around getting all the loose balls. At 4 years old, he's training with these guys, doing warm-ups and the warm-downs. Okay? Still got his job of getting the balls, but he's doing the warm-ups and the one. And then at 7 years old, he was too good for them. So that was when my wife said, you've got to coach him. And at that point, that journey started. Now, at 11, he joined Everton's academy. And I decided he's had enough of me. I'm not going. And people find this hard to believe, Greg. And if I had any advice to parents in America, the wisest thing you want to do? Drop your kid off, go shopping, and pick your kid up. That way, you have nothing to say in the car home. You can't be interfering with what the coach is doing. And your kid is enjoying their football. And I never used to go. His mum would, and she didn't. She went to the games. Neither of us watched any training sessions.
Wow.
The whole time he was at Everton, 9 years, we never watched him train.
You know, one of the things.
Sorry,
Tony.
brother. Go ahead, brother.
One of the things that Tony and I talk about all the time, and we've hit on this before, is we see a lot of kids who are saying, yeah, I want to go over or whatever. So while he's dealing with clubs, we're also dealing with a lot of kids, right? It's a two-way street here. And without fail, Tony and I have 5 conversations in a week. 4 of them will bring up some new kid with some parent that is totally fucking everything up for this kid. It's just line them up, and they just keep on coming. You know, the hits just keep on coming. It's like, so when he says that, it's just like, yeah, man, if the parents would just heed that advice, just let your kids do it. But anyway, back to Jedi on that.
Yeah,
so,
and I think, I'll be honest with you guys, another thing that I would advise parents that we did, and that Everton Football Club will always have affection for me and Kelly, because we also never had anything to say. Okay? We never had anything to say. And his reviews, you know, his twice yearly reviews are legendary, because I would walk in, sit down. We love Anthony. And by the way, nobody calls him Anthony. Everybody calls him Jedi. And we love Jedi. Unbelievable kid. Attitude from another planet. We're happy to. Questions? No. Oh, great. That's a new record. And we'd be out. And that was his entire time at Everton. We didn't bother anyone. We didn't question the coaches. You know, guys, sometimes I would hear things, you know, Kelly would tell me things from a game. The odd game that I must have gone to less than 10 games in 9 years. And I'd be seeing things and you want to say something, but I can honestly tell you, we kept our mouths shut. We didn't interfere with the coaches. And I said to Jedi, you're in one of the best academies in the world. Who the hell am I to be telling anybody anything? And really, I was just there, Greg, for when, you know, the few times when Jedi had problems, I was there being the father I never had, you know, and I knew what to tell him. I knew.
Right. Tell them about the time Jedi, was like, I'm not playing enough. I'm not getting any time. And he was a bit distressed. I don't know, maybe he was an early teen or something. I think this is one of the greatest lessons for all players.
Yeah. I think when you look at where he is today, it's hard to believe. But he, from age 11 to 16, he wasn't really thought highly of at Everton. I think they knew that he could become something, but during that period, he wasn't special to them, and he was always a sub. Always, you know, he never started a game, and in his very first year, he didn't understand this because, you know, he'd been this little prodigy thing, and always playing with older boys and thinking, he's like, you know, I don't understand this. I'm not playing. And I sat him down and I said, son, How many times do you train a week? 5, Dad. How many times do you play? 1. Which do you think's more important? Training. Why? Because you do more of it. So what I want you to do, son, is to go in every day attempting to be the best trainer they have. I want you to do that with a smile on your face, no matter what's going on. And at the end of training, help your coach clear everything up. And he did that. And I told him, Greg, I told him, I said, if you do that, you'll go past all of them. And he did.
Yeah,
He
great
did.
advice. I was going to say, share with us, as we get toward the end here, as a parent, what were your feelings on these 2 events? At age 17, he turned pro, and his first goal, I don't know if you were in the stands when he scored against Honduras when he did the famous flip. So take us through both of these events as the parent of him.
I can tell you one thing: his pro debut wasn't as emotional for me as the day he actually signed professional. The day that he signed professional, he shocked me. He completely shocked me because I was with his agent. And we're walking behind him into Finch Farms reception, the Everton training ground. And Jedi's walking in front of us. And his agent turns to me and says, he's going to be a top player. And I said, how do you know that? He said, look at him. He's walking into there like he owns the place. There's nothing phasing him. He's not, most kids be nervous and he said, look at him. And I did. I looked at him and I thought, wow, a bit of Marlon in there, And he went in and it was almost like, yeah, where do I sign? Yeah, okay, can we go home now? And that stuck in my mind even more than when he made his pro debut for Bolton Wanderers against Crewe. And that day, everything just went really fast, Greg. It just flew by, and it's hard for me to remember. I know he did play well in the game. He didn't play brilliant or anything. He played well. And I've been thanking Phil Parkinson, who's at Wrexham now, been thanking him ever since. But it went by very fast. But the day he signed, that day went really slow. And I was just like, where did he get this from? Because, if that was Marlon, he'd be in Liverpool city centre in a bar with 8 women. That's his pro. The US debut, actually, I wasn't there when he made his debut, and I can't tell you why I wasn't there. I have no idea. I can't remember, literally, but I wasn't there. I was watching it on TV. The game that he was supposed to make his debut was in North Carolina when Sarachan was the coach.
I
And
see.
Kelly went over for the game because I had the flu, the proper flu. I actually thought, that's it. I'm last rites. I ain't coming out of this. And she went over, but he didn't play in that game. I think he played in the next one. So yeah, that's why I didn't go. I was ill. I was very
Got
ill.
it. I'm going to end it on this and then turn it back to headquarters. And I don't know, Ryan, if you can find this, but You know, we do know your son is a card trick person. And obviously you're laughing, so you know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
When was the first time you saw him do this trick live in front of people? Obviously it's on YouTube. It's hilarious. And I think it's even more hilarious on how you do it, which I did investigate. And it took him,
You figured
quite
it
a few
out?
times to do it. Pardon me?
You figured it out?
Yeah, here we go. I don't know if you can turn it up, Ryan, because there's a lot of talking in it.
So I'm going to tell you a story about what happened to me. Even I was walking on the street. I met these girls that were these two redheads. I was walking,
You're gonna have to give a
speaking to them for
play-by-play
1
here.
to 3 minutes, and their friends came over. It was two brunettes.
All I know,
Hi,
Greg,
I'm
is
Jedi.
that
Nice to meet you.
This
So
thing
what are you doing
went
tonight? I said, oh, we're going to a
viral
party at
and had some
673
stupid,
King
like,
Street.
5
I
million
said, how much did it
hits
get
or
in? They said, it's
something.
25 quid. I said, how much? I said, 25 quid.
And
So, I'm walking down to them. Then someone
everybody's
rings me. I said, hello,
saying to
Jedi
me,
speaking. Who is it?
What,
I said,
what's the trick?
what
How's
are
he
you doing
done
tonight? I
that?
said, I'm going
And I said,
to a party with
that's
these
the
girls at
first time I've
700
seen
something
it.
King Street. No, the girls knew that was wrong. They said, no.
Wow. Pat, have you ever seen
673 King Street. So oh my God, sorry, it's
I've
673
seen
King
the
Street.
video.
Do you remember how much
I
it was to get in?
don't remember the exacts of it, but
25 quid. Said all I've got on me is £10. The band said, don't lie. I said, all right, I've got £40, but that's all I've got. Can you
So
give me a
was his
good
dad.
table with them at least? They
I've
said,
no
yeah, no
idea
problem,
how he did
Jedi, I'll
it.
sort
When
you
I
out.
asked him, he wouldn't tell me.
As his dad, though, I
So,
gotta say this.
put the cards again.
So Marlon taught. Really, I was, guitar hack of the worst kind.
So
and he
when we
he
got there, we ended
encouraged
up going
me to
into the
just
casino.
become a hack.
And everyone wanted me to
Because
cut cards
Tony
for them, give
here's
them a good
pretty
hand so
musically
that they'd win. So the
inclined.
first guy said,
And
can you give me a pair of
I
fours and
understand
3 eights? I said,
Jedi's
yeah, that's fine.
pretty much a
There's
whiz
3
on the
eights.
piano.
Next guy said, oh, I want to beat
Yeah.
that. Can you give me 4
The
nines?
story
So I said,
there,
yeah, that's
Greg,
fine.
is I
My
came
friend who I
home
walked
one
in with, he
evening
said, can you give me an
from
8 and 4 aces? I said, no problem. There's 1, there's 2,
and
there's
I'd
3, there's
heard
4.
music.
Everyone looked at me and said, Jedi,
upstairs,
you're
so I
not going to
thought,
beat that hand.
they've
And
left
then
the
I
TV
turn
on
around and
again.
pull out the flush.
I go upstairs and Jedi's playing on this piano, and I said, "When is that a trick piano? You know those pianos that it's playing in?" And he goes, "No, I'm playing it." And I said, "Well, when did you learn to play the piano?" He said, "I just taught myself."
Well, thank you so much for being on the show. The stories were fantastic. Pat,
You're
I'm going to turn
welcome.
it over to you because, you're his bro, and I'll let you and Evie figure out, how you want to close the show out.
No, it's been good. It's been long. It's been long and good. But I appreciate you coming on, man.
There's two things that I would say. First of all, what Pat and Tony are doing really and truly boils to having a realistic view of a player's abilities and where he fits in. A lot of times, and you know this, Greg, a lot of times in the United States, we think kids are great, right? But you're talking about the world game, and you're talking about kids all over the world who, this is what they live for. Like Tony said, when he was 11 years old, he discovered Cruyff, and it took him a whole new avenue, right? And the ability to realistically evaluate a kid and where he fits into the overall scheme is the key to their business.
Yeah.
And then the next step is shaping the kid, right? And it's all part of what I've listened to. I listened to Tony. I listened to Pat, and I listened to you talking. And it reminds me of what Hank used to tell us. Greg was, after you finish playing, be a custodian of the game, and serve the game, because the game, in any small amount, has served you. So, as Pat said, give back. It's time to give back. That's kind of the serious part of this. Here's something I'm thinking about when I'm listening to all this. Can you imagine, Greg, if both Pat and Marlon had wound up playing for Tarantini at NC State? I don't think you would have heard as much about Indiana. You would have heard as much about Virginia back in those days, because I remember coaching against NC State, and what George allowed players to do was be ultra creative. And you talk about, I mean, I'm thinking back to these NC State teams that, from my point of view as a goalkeeper coach, concerned me much more than any of the other teams when we played them, because State, correct me if I'm wrong here, Pat and Marlon, that was a team that whoever had the ball last was probably going to win. Because they just they were kind of unpredictable, but they were predictable because you knew, Tab Ramos, all these guys who played for them could play. They could ball, man, and you never knew what side of how you'd end up. But imagine if those two guys played for those teams. It would have been.
And I remember, EV, that the one thing about George, George subscribed to you have to entertain the people watching. That you've got to entertain the people watching. I'd rather lose, and they said, "What a team!"
Yes.
Than win, and they went, "Oh, that was rubbish."
Yeah.
You have to entertain, and as Evie said many times, 5-4, 4-3, crazy scores, 5-5, because he was like, "I don't care if they score, you just score more." And that, I think that truly was why I loved him. And I'll tell you one thing Evie's right about. When I played for that guy, he saw the best of me, God rest his soul. He saw the best. And he had no problem with me. He was like, "You just go and play."
Sure.
How can I tell you what to do? Just go and do it.
Yeah, he used to. I mean, he was good friends with Coach Rennie. He really was. They were good friends, and he used to be over at Duke all the time. And he'd always say in his accent, which I won't even try to emulate because it was classic. But he'd say, "I got 2 rules, right? Go to class, go to goal." It was simple, And you kind of want to play for a guy.
That quote by Cruyff is my philosophy. That's my philosophy of football.
Okay. Well done, Ryan. Way to pull that.
Yep, that is. He says it all the time, Ryan. He really does. So
I posted that on my Facebook today.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Kismet.
Yeah. That's how it should be.
Anyway, gents, Marlon, thanks. Tony, thank you. Yep. Pleasure. I'm sure we'll, have some more stories to come on back with. Okay. Bring some guests, whatever. But nonetheless, we really appreciate you taking the time. It's 11. It's going on midnight in England right now, folks.
Damn.
So, yep. Thanks for having us.
Well, for the record, I'm not editing that part out, by the way.
I'm delighted. I can't thank you guys so much because I've actually had a ball, a great time. I say cheers to all of you. But, maybe the next time you get me on, I can tell you some of the stories of Jedi's character that I think a lot of your parents and young players would be very, very intrigued.
I think we would love to do that. And I'll tell you what, we'd love to have Jedi on as well.
Yes, if I can find him. He hides from me a lot,
Well, just tell him when he gets on, our ratings are going to go through the roof.
We'll definitely
have more than 14 listeners then, Evie.
Yeah, all right. We might bang there to 16 or 17.
Right?
God bless Aiden Heaney.
Yeah. He saved us that night. He saved us. So, all right, boys. Signing off here.
Thank you. Appreciate it, fellas. Talk to you later.
Thank you for watching and listening to the 3 Old Goalies podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Follow us on social media And if you can, give us a 5-star review. Can't get enough? Check us out online at 3oldgoalies.com. See you next time.